Okay, so the fundamentals in hypothesis testing, I wanted to go through quickly. Okay, based on the existing knowledge. Awesome. I'm so happy that a lot of them are clear because it's a tough subject. Based on the existing knowledge, form a hypothesis to explain something about the unknown. Okay. Frequently, this hypothesis is the opposite of what we hope to show. Okay. So we always assume that the null hypothesis is true. We collect the data. And then, as I told you, we seek some compelling evidence to show in support or against the null hypothesis. Okay, if null hypothesis is contradicted, we reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternate hypothesis. Okay, now I'm going to get into something called as, there is always, even after you collect enough evidence and get into a marriage, still there is a risk. How many of you agree with me? Type agree in the chat box. If you super agree with me, you can type SA in the chat box. If you type super agree, you can type SSSSSSA in the chat box. Okay. All right. Okay. So there is always a degree of risk, even if you prove the null hypothesis is true. Okay. Now, there is a risk because we are not in the perfect world. Okay. Now, to determine appropriate sample size, like for example, you inquire about the spouse, inquire about the fiancé, right? Before getting married, you collect enough evidence. Okay. And what should be the sample size? Okay. Magnitude of acceptable decision risk, test sensitivity. I'll explain all that now. And then you cannot go on, keep on introspecting because there is a cost and time involved into this. So we need to arrive at a rational sampling plan and all that. Now, the steps are like this. You state this null hypothesis, which is H naught. You start gathering evidence to either prove or contradict the null hypothesis. And then we will decide whether we should reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. Okay. Now, for example, if somebody claims, hey, drinking water is safe. Let's say that we make a claim that drinking water is safe everywhere in this place. You come to a new place and they say drinking water is safe. Now, if you say the alternate hypothesis is only boil the water or use a boiled water if the data indicates the likelihood of contamination. So you will gather evidence of the existing water to see if there is any contamination in this. If it is proved that the water is contaminated, then you reject the null hypothesis in favor of the alternate hypothesis and say that the water is contaminated here and you should start seeing. So we don't conclude that our experiment has an effect until the probability of no effect is too small. Okay. Now, it's same as this. When somebody comes to the court of law, what do we assume? We say that innocent. And there is in judgment, there is always a saying. I don't know how many of you have heard about it. He is innocent unless proven guilty. How many of you know this? Type KNOW in the chat box. If you don't know, you can type NO in the chat box. He is innocent. Even though you make a claim that he has done a mistake, he has done the crime, he has done the robbery, he has done this, he has done that, he is innocent. That is the null hypothesis. There is no difference. He's a normal person, and you need to provide enough evidence to prove he is wrong. Okay? Innocent unless proven guilty. Okay. So the prosecuting attorney must provide evidence beyond reasonable doubt that the assumption is not true. Now, beyond reasonable doubt means there is always the factor of doubt, which is called alpha. Okay, this alpha is called as a type 1 error. All of you type alpha is equal to type 1 error. Okay, from here, people may drop out because this is little theoretical and mathematical. But if you have enough resistance to be in the session, okay, enough guts to be in the session, then those are the people who really are lifelong learners and who can solve problems and grow up in the career. If you give up too early, oh, this is, what is that, theoretical, I'm going to leave this session boring, then you are like any other 96% of the crowd who give up easily. Okay, I just want to see how many of you will stay after this. It will exactly how many people have this ability. You will not understand the first time. Okay, you will not understand the first time. I'm telling you, I have not understood the first time. 95% of the people will not understand the first time. No, I'm not asking people to stay. If you feel bored, you can leave. That's fine. Absolutely. Okay. It'll only show me an evidence how many people will stay back. Okay. So the truth and the decision. There is always a truth. There is always a decision. There is always a decision that we take in our life, but the truth might be something else. The decision we take might always not favor the truth. How many of you are clear about this? Type super clear in the chat box. We wanted to assume, oh, this is what it is. We wanted to make a claim and then take a decision, but there is always a factor that it is risky. Okay, so the null hypothesis is accused is not guilty. So the truth is he's not guilty, he is innocent. And the decision is, okay, he is not guilty. I accept that he is not guilty. If you accept that, that is the correct decision. Okay, I will explain about confidence later. That is the correct decision. If this is clear, type SC, super clear in the chat box. This is the correct decision because we all know what is ultimate truth, right? I mean, we don't know, but there is an ultimate truth. Whether he has done the crime or not done the crime, there is a real truth. Okay, but through evidence they are proving it, and they have proved that he is not guilty. That's a correct decision. Okay, now suppose the truth is he has not done the crime, but the lawyer somehow manipulates and makes it. There is a risk, okay, that we punish an innocent person. That is called as a type 1 error. If this is clear, type SC, super clear in the chat box. This is called false positive, alpha risk. Or in other words, sometimes what happens is, it's a good piece. Suppose if you're in manufacturing. If you're in manufacturing, product is bad. If you reject the bad part, if you reject, that is a correct decision. But if you accept the bad part, then it will go to the consumer. How many of you are clear about this? In manufacturing, if the part is bad, if you accept the bad, if you are inspecting a part and you found that the part is defective, that's a correct decision. Whereas, if the part is bad, but the quality clears it is good, who is affected finally? Customer or consumer. So that is called as consumer risk or customer risk. That is alpha. Whereas if you reject the bad part, that is good, that is correct. Whereas if you accept a bad part, it will be a consumer risk. Suppose if you reject a good part, who suffers? If you reject a good part, who suffers? Company suffers, okay? The organization suffers. That is called type 2 error. Okay? So, this is like, I'm giving two examples, both in a real life example where an innocent person finds guilty, as well as the manufacturing, okay? So, if the person is not guilty, and you accept he is not guilty, it's the right decision. If you do it otherwise, it's called as an alpha risk. Similarly, if the truth is he is guilty, and if you reject it and you punish him, that is a correct decision. Whereas if you let him free, it is a type 2 error. Okay, it is like a guilty person is let free. Okay, that is called type 2 error. So alpha is that risk. Okay, beta is the risk of missing the real difference. So that 1 minus beta we call as a power. Okay, I will take this power. What is power exactly? Because it's the most difficult concept to understand in a later session. But I can just let you know now that power is a probability to correctly reject the null hypothesis, because you need to correctly reject. Okay, so if you produce large evidence, then you can correctly reject. That's why in manufacturing we say increase the sample size so that you are able to detect the difference and you can correctly reject the null hypothesis. Okay, to this extent I can tell you, those of you who understood well, and if it is clear to you, you can give me a 9 or 10. If you're not understood, it's absolutely fine. So power is a likelihood that you will identify the significant effect when it happens. So type 1 error, type 2 error, both together I've put here, okay? Like when a guilty person, okay, is let free, or a not guilty person is punished. Okay, so that's how the type 1 and type 2 error is. Okay, the next thing is, I can also say in the alpha risk, you can say that this is a rejected part, okay? And this rejected part you fail to reject. It's a bad part, okay? The bad part you fail to reject, this is type 2 error. Okay, this is called consumer risk, because it reaches the consumer, the risk of not finding a real difference, okay, when there is actually a real difference or a bad part, okay? And if it is a good part, you reject a good part, and it's called as a producer risk, because the risk of finding the difference when that's really not the right one. The scrap parts, okay, example, scrap good part. You are scrapping a good part. Okay, so owner's risk. All right, so this is a correct decision. Okay, so the question is, which of the following best describes the type 1 error? Okay, accepting the null hypothesis when it's true, rejecting the null hypothesis when it's true, accepting the alternate hypothesis when it's false, and failing to reject the null hypothesis when it is false. I'm sure this is like a twist of tongue, right? So please give your answer. Type 1 error is rejecting the null hypothesis when it's true. Okay, familiar yourself with this. Okay, right. So we said hypothesis testing is a procedure for testing the claim. It answers practical question. What is the real difference between the practical problem, statistical solution, practical solution?